Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Jared Hammond, and I am the chair of the worship arts team here at East Shore Unitarian Universalist Church in Kirtland, Ohio. Thank you for joining us here today beneath the beacon and on Facebook Live. Whether you are a member or a friend of our congregation, whether you join us every Sunday or only occasionally, whether we've known you for decades or you've just met us for the first time today, whether you are here with us under the beacon or you join us from your own sacred space, you are welcome here. Acknowledging your skin color, ancestry, and expressions of gender, your net worth, your political opinions, and the people you love, and the long, winding journey that brought you here this morning, you are welcome. May this be a time of reflection and renewal, a time to live into our mission to love, revere, discover, and connect. Please rise as you are willing and able and join us in singing our opening hymn, number 38 in the gray hymnal, Morning Has Broken. As you may have noted in your order of service this morning, many of the words for today's service were chosen by or come from directly Reverend Renee Ruchotzke. She will not be here this morning, but she did offer these words for us to use this morning. So we greatly appreciate that gift from her. And we call to worship this morning with the words of Robin Wall Kimmerer from the book Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. In the Western tradition, there is a recognized hierarchy of beings, with, of course, the human being on top, the pinnacle of evolution, the darling of creation, and the plants at the bottom. But in native ways of knowing, human people are often referred to as the younger brothers of creation. We say that humans have the least experience with how to live and thus the most to learn. We must look to our teachers among the other species for guidance. Their wisdom is apparent in the way that they live. They teach us by example. They've been on the earth far longer than we have been and have had time to figure things out. Ricky, can I ask you to light the chalice this morning? And as she does so, I will be sharing the words of Elizabeth Lerner McClay. As drops of rain that find each other and build to become a track, a rivulet, a stream, a river, a sea, so are we drawn together. so are we fortunate to find each other. So are we bound together on this shared passage toward an unknown ocean and eternity. Thank you. So each Sunday morning, we place at the very center of our worship, both in the physical center of our space beneath our beacon and in the emotional center within this book, our joys and cares. If you've not yet had an opportunity to do so, you may pick up a stone from the bowl at the top of the aisle. And if you have one, or if you brought one with you this morning, I invite you to hold on to it as we explore the joys and cares shared and unshared for this morning. This morning we have a thank you to all the people who donated blood yesterday. Even with the problems the Red Cross had, they still got 19 pints. This is their last scheduled time, but we hope to have them again soon. You can call the Red Cross and ask when they are coming here again. And Maggie asks for healing prayers for a very close friend who was diagnosed with breast cancer on Friday. Her name is Majette. Also, Rocco and Lucy, canine companions of good friends, are also battling cancer and need positive healing prayers. So for these and all of the unspoken joys and cares in our hearts, as we hold on to our stones and the joys and cares inside of us, we will observe a moment of silence. And when the singing bowl sounds, I'll invite you to join me in placing these stones in the bowl beneath our beacon at the center of our space. Please join me in placing a stone in the bowl. now sharing a prayer from George A. Tiger. O power of springtime, spirit of green grasses and warm breezes, goddess of creativity, of birth, of life renewed, you sing all about us all this time. The birds call your sacred name, buds burst forth with your vestment. The sun reaches higher into the sky, shining the light of this new day through the windows of your cathedral, this world. O power of springtime, forgive us our speediness and our racing before your eternal grace, that we do not see the miracle world we share. Open our eyes with your warmth and our hearts with your beauty. Slow our minds with awe and wonder. Dear spirit of green grasses and warm breezes, let us find here in these moments of quiet the grace of your breath, as we breathe into our bodies the spirit of spring. Now sharing a reading, again from Robin Wall Kimmerer from Gathering Moss. My former husband used to teasingly deride my passion for mosses, saying that mosses were just decoration. To him, mosses were merely the wallpaper of the forest, providing ambiance for his photographs of trees. A carpet of mosses does in fact provide this lustrous green light, but focus the lens on the mossy wallpaper itself, and the green blur of the background resolves itself into sharp focus, and an entirely new dimension appears. That wallpaper, which seemed at first glance to be of uniform weave, is in fact a complex tapestry, a brocaded surface of intricate pattern. The moss is many different mosses of widely divergent forms. There are fronds like miniature ferns, wefts like ostrich plumes, and shining tufts like the silky hair of a baby. A close encounter with a mossy log always makes me think of entering a fantasy fabric shop. Its windows overflow with rich textures and colors that invite you closer to inspect the bolts of cloth arrayed before you. You can run your fingertips over a silky drape of plagiothecium and finger the glossy brothalaria brocade. There are dark woolly tufts of dicranum, sheets of golden brachythecium, and shining ribbons of mynium. The yardage of nubbly brown calicladium tweed is shot through with gilt threads of campylium. To pass hurriedly by without looking is like walking by the Mona Lisa chatting on a cell phone, oblivious. Draw closer to this carpet of green light and shadow, and slender branches form a leafy arbor over sturdy trunks. Rain drips through the canopy, and scarlet mites roam over the leaves. The architecture of the surrounding forest is repeated in the form of the moss carpet. The fir forest and the moss forest mirroring each other. Let your focus shift to the scale of a dewdrop. The forest landscape now becomes the blurred wallpaper, only a backdrop to the distinctive moss microcosm. Learning to see mosses is more like listening than looking. A cursory glance will not do it. Straining to hear a faraway voice or catch a nuance in the quiet subtext of a conversation requires attentiveness, a filtering of all the noise, to catch the music. Mosses are not elevator music. They are the intertwined threads of a Beethoven quartet. You can look at mosses the way you can listen deeply to water running over rocks. The soothing sound of a stream has many voices. The soothing green of mosses, likewise. Freeman House writes of stream sounds. There is a rushing tumble of the stream running over itself, the splashing against rocks. Then, with care and quiet, the individual tones can be discerned in the fugue of stream sound. The slip of water over a boulder, octaves above the deep tone of shifting gravel, the gurgle of the channel sluicing between rocks, the bell-like notes of a drop falling into a pool. So it is with looking at mosses. Slowing down and coming close, we see patterns emerge and expand out from the tangled tapestry threads. The threads are simultaneously distinct from the whole and part of the whole. I think I got most of those pronunciations right, of those mosses. There's like, included within the reading, there's like how to spell it out, but those are also difficult, so hopefully I did my best. If there's any moss experts out there, I'm sorry. But speaking of the music of mosses, I have a song for you this morning, and I'm gonna go ahead and play that now. And this comes from a band called The Head and the Heart. For hours, honey, you can get lost in a room. We can play music for hours and hours, but the sun will still be coming up soon. The world's just spinning a little too fast. If things don't slow it down soon, we might not last. So just for a moment, let's be still. Lost in the music for hours, honey, you can get lost in a room. We can play music for hours and hours, but the sun will still be coming up soon. The world's not forgiving of everyone's fears. The days turning into months, the months turning into years. So just for a moment, let's be still. Let's tear it down so we can rebuild. All of this time, it's just circles in my mind. So just for a moment, just for one moment, just for a moment, let's be still. 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 So like I said, the words of our sermon this morning come from Reverend Renee Ruchotzke. And while she is not here with us this morning, she did offer these words for us to use. And the good news for those of you who are watching this in the future on YouTube is that right now, we're going to cut to Reverend Renee speaking these words herself in a video. So here you go.
My husband and I have lived in the heart of our college town for over 15 years. We love being just a short walk from downtown, where we have a grocery co-op, restaurants, and a music venue. We bought our current house because we loved being in the heart of the city. We were looking for a place that had a yard with enough space and sun for a garden. To say that the house didn't have curb appeal when we bought it would have been an understatement. The backyard was all concrete and outbuildings. The house had a wet basement, nicotine-stained walls, and falling ceilings. The plumbing was outdated and the wiring was downright dangerous. The house renovations, though challenging, were all technical fixes. We could hire carpenters, plumbers, and electricians. We could watch how-to videos to repair the plaster and lay the flooring. A house is just a lifeless, static structure that isn't all that complicated if you have the needed skills and expertise. A house, being conceived of and made by humans, can be easily understood and altered by humans. It would have been tempting to approach the yard in the same way. We had to start by undoing the damage to the land from the previous human alterations. We hired a contractor to tear down the outbuildings and to pry out the concrete and haul it all away. We had an infestation of the pretty but stunningly invasive plant called fish mint. It took a summer of painstaking excavation to pull out the tenacious root system. We were faced with a decision. What do we do about the land in our backyard? We are surrounded by a culture that looks at land as a commodity, where the extraction of monetary wealth from land is protected by the highest laws of the land. Our culture looks at insects as pests to be poisoned. We look at wildlife as vermin to be removed. We look at trees and plants as ornaments to decorate our edifices. The value of the natural world has been subjugated to human desire. We have written rules protecting property rights, starting with our federal and state constitutions. We have laws that privilege extractive uses of property. This privilege to extract enabled the atrocities committed by enslavers. Today, it enables frackers to poison groundwater. We also have unwritten rules or norms. Look at most new housing developments. The first thing the developers do is clear the land of vegetation, they drain the wetlands, and they scrape off the topsoil. We may mourn the trees that have been growing and the wetlands that have been forming over hundreds of years, but the soil itself is a whole ecosystem with millions of microscopic organisms like bacteria, protozoa, and fungi, partnering with worms, nematodes, and insects. Our unwritten rules enable developers to turn living soil into dead dirt. Human greed is part of the story for sure, but there is a deeper problem here. That problem is human hubris, manifested as colonialism, patriarchy, and white supremacy, as well as many other linked oppressions. The beliefs that certain classes, races, or castes should be given dominance over others is part of the problem. The beliefs that we can depend on science and engineering to fix all of our problems we create is also part of the problem. But I think the problem is more fundamental. Living systems have their own sets of rules, rules that are grounded in our interconnectedness and mutuality. We hold dear the scientific method, but science assumes that scientists can be perfectly objective. We pretend that humans aren't part of nature's interconnection. We also have the problem that too many people, both believers and atheists, who think that humans are the pinnacle of creation and should dominate the natural world. We have a class of people who are used to being in charge. We have a class of people who are used to not being accountable to one another. We have a class of people who are used to making the rules of doing things their own way. Let's get back to the land in our backyard that had been entombed in concrete for decades. Around the same time that we bought the house, we started studying permaculture. Permaculture is often described as a gardening method, but it is really a way of observing and being in mutual relationship with nature. We learn the rules of nature by observing nature, by noticing patterns of wind, sun, and rain, by noticing habits of growth, by noticing the microclimates that are created by the contour of the land. I was oh so tempted to start laying out an attractive design, to bring in some dump trucks of soil, compost, and manure, and to rototill it into the land, like mixing together cake ingredients. I wanted to start planting. That's how things are usually done, after all. Those are the unwritten rules. Luckily, I had partners who were part of a support system in this awkward time of learning and transformation, both my husband and the permaculture community. So instead of imposing our will upon the land, we spent a year observing the land with only minor intervention. The first thing we noticed was a tenacious little tomato plant. It started growing in a spot that had been under one of the outbuildings. The little seed must have been under there for years, waiting for its chance to germinate. And with the encouragement of rain and sun, so it did. But there was little in the compacted earth to nurture it, so once it exhausted the stored energy of the seed and what little nutrients there might have been available to it in the land, it withered and died. It was clear from our observations that the land needed to heal. And we learned that the best way to build soil is to create the conditions where the land can heal and build itself. We learned that tilling disrupts the microscopic ecosystem that is in the soil and releases carbon into the atmosphere. Instead, we covered the whole backyard with about 18 inches of wood and leaf mulch that we hauled from our city's yard waste facility, load by pickup truck load. We planted cover crops that capture carbon and nitrogen from the atmosphere. We also welcomed volunteer weeds such as dock and locust that serve as natural restorers of soil. It took 2 years, but the plants, fungi, and microcritters did their invisible work and turned the mulch into a beautiful, rich, living humus. We observed with a scientific eye. We tracked where there was direct sunlight throughout the solar year. We noted how the frost impacted different parts of the lot. But there are other ways to observe, ways that are much more relational. We can observe in the way that Robin Wall Kimmerer looks at moss. You may have heard of Mary Reynolds, the mystical Celtic landscape artist that won a gold medal at the Chelsea Flower Show. Her guidance in the book The Garden Awakening taught me that I needed to listen to the land by engaging in a kind of walking meditation. And so I did. One way to think about our yard is that it had experienced trauma. And if you know anything about trauma, you'll know that the victim needs to be in control of the healing. So I cleared my mind. I walked in a spiral from the outer edges to the center, acknowledging the harm while listening with an open heart. Over time, a pattern emerged and the garden design flowed from there. We knew where to bury the nurse logs for our fruit trees and nut bushes from our observations, where to plant the sun-loving and the shade-loving plants. We've noted the changes in growth of each tree, plant, and bush like a doting parent. We've counted the dozen of bee species that visit our pollinator garden. We've been delighted by the plants that appear without our having planted them. We have continued observing, learning more about permaculture, and making adjustments. The land is now thriving and teeming with life, and we feel a deeper sense of the interconnectedness of nature. My deep dive into permaculture also has informed my ministry. There is a branch of permaculture called social permaculture, which I am bringing to congregations as part of my work. A lot of my work is organizational development, helping congregations understand themselves as living systems. Just as we are learning that a forest is not just a group of individual trees, we are also learning that organizations are not just a group of individual people. Before I talk about the patterns that create a healthy, mutual, life-giving community, I want to shine a light on the patterns that are unhealthy. We have inherited patterns of domination, exploitation, and oppression from the extractive mindset of our forebears. For-profit businesses and corporations try to extract as much short-term financial value from their workers as possible, often without consideration of what is healthy or sustainable, and at a huge human cost. These patterns also play out in not-for-profit organizations, where the staff is often overworked and underpaid. The difference is that they are exploited in service of the mission rather than in service of pure profit. These patterns can even show up in our congregations in how we approach the volunteer labor that is the lifeblood of our church communities. Many common idioms use the language of extraction, exploitation, coercion, or hierarchy. What is our message when we talk about the pipeline to leadership, a fire hose of information, burning the candle at both ends, or the rank and file of an organization? What is the meaning of these terms when we are trying to be beloved community? People come to our congregations in the hope of finding a place to thrive, of finding the equivalent of nutrient-rich soil that will help them learn and grow, to help them find and make meaning. If we ask that they use their own stored energy and don't offer nutrients, their relationship with the church will wither and die. Volunteering and other forms of service are a part of meaning making, but service needs to happen in the wider context of mutuality. All healthy, life-giving relationships between humans depend on healthy mutual communication. It's no secret that marriages and other life partnerships require lots of healthy mutual communication every step of the way. This is also true of our congregations. Our congregations need to be intentional about creating patterns and systems of healthy communication every step of the way. We know that healthy communication is mutual communication. Healthy communication means listening deeply to one another. Healthy communication in our congregations also means making space for a variety of voices. It means listening deeply to the dissenting voices and addressing their underlying concerns. We are learning from our anti-racism work that our inherited forms of congregational governance and decision-making include practices that reinforce systems of oppression because they reinforce existing structures of power. Robert's Rules of Order and policy governance are great for getting things done, but they are based on an ethos that is designed to prevent disruptions that could threaten existing systems of power. I know this from personal experience, both as the person with the gavel and as the person who was trying to have a voice when the person with the gavel didn't want to hear my concerns. One thing we have learned during the past year of pandemic and of protests is that existing systems of power need to be disrupted. Black and brown and indigenous voices need to be heard. Our ecosystem and climate can no longer be afterthoughts. Over the past year, I have been learning about and experimenting with different forms of decision-making and governance that are based in principles of social permaculture. The basic pattern or form of healthy communication within a group is the circle, which is a form that we already know from our small group ministry programs and our practice of peace circles. There is a form of governance called dynamic governance, or also known as sociocracy, that offers a way of flattening hierarchy, of disrupting domination by the few, and instead promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. Creating opportunities for discernment and decision-making in a circle helps create an opportunity to bring mutuality and balance into a community. Open, healthy communication practices result in life-giving, creative communities of humans. As we begin to transition into our new post-pandemic normal, we have an opportunity to build resilience into our communities by building up healthy and inclusive communication structures, including circles. we have an opportunity to move forward in ways that are based in our values of mutuality and consent. We have an opportunity to be a model of beloved community that reflects both our Unitarian and Universalist values of radical love and radical inclusion. Let us widen our circle of concern by being that community. Amen and blessed be.
And so ends the words of Reverend Renee Ruchotzke. And I invite you to rise as you are willing and able and open your great hymnals to number 83, Winds Be Still. It struck me as I was reading through Reverend Renee's words just now, how unfortunate it is that I was speaking of including diverse voices and saying literally everything in the service by myself. That wasn't the intention, of course. There could have been someone here to also be doing some readings and maybe reflecting, but it just didn't work out that way. So if you notice that too, please be aware, I didn't do it on purpose. And if you want to be involved in this, let me know. But speaking of being involved in this, one of the ways in which we involve ourselves in community outside of those volunteer opportunities that are so important, the lifeblood, as Reverend Renee pointed out, we also involve ourselves with the other gifts that we give to this community. The flowers we bring forth to sit at the front of the sanctuary during our Sunday worship, the stones that we bring and we place at the center, our joys and concerns that those represent, as well as the financial gifts that we bring, the pledges we make, and the small gifts that we give during collection on Sundays. If this is your first time here with us this morning, I invite you to let the collection basket pass you as our guest. Thank you so much for being here.
Stars
Thank you all so much for the gifts that you give this morning and throughout the year. And please know that those financial gifts will be used wisely and with great care by your Board of Trustees. And now a benediction from Starhawk. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us. Eyes will light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. And with that, if there are no other announcements or corrections, I invite you to rise and join hands as you feel comfortable doing so for our bond of union. And our Facebook Live folks can join us as well. We join hands in Unitarian Universalist fellowship, pledging ourselves to an individual religious freedom which transcends all creeds, not to think alike, but to journey together. Bye, friends.